Welcome back. We're on page 438 talking about how to identify risks. Okay, so there's some suggestions here in the book about how you can identify a risk, and they talk about several things that, okay, they're a little weird. You probably heard these terms, brainstorming, where you get a bunch of people together, and it's kind of a free flow kind of a thing where everybody just blurts out what's on their mind. What about this and what about that? It's just kind of a continuous group think kind of thing. And it works pretty decent. The only problem is that, you have some people in the room that won't say anything. Other people just go along with what everybody else thinks because they don't want to be there. So brainstorming is good for getting out of the box ideas. Okay. There's another one called the Delphi approach, and it's very similar to brainstorming in its concept. But it's basically trying to prevent groupthink. It's trying to prevent non-participation and people going along with things just because I'm tired. I'll say that sounds good, just to be out of there. Interviewing. Now, interviewing is like fact-finding. I'm trying to not necessarily get their opinions necessarily, but I'm asking, what about this and what about that? And so you go out and interview major stakeholders and maybe even customers, right? That would be good. The SWOT analysis, SHRINKS, that's an acronym for strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats. Basically, where are my opportunities, my positive risks? Where are my threats, my negative risks? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? And so you would basically come up with, one of those little 4-quadrant strengths, opportunities, weaknesses, threats. And you're trying to get the strengths and the weaknesses to kind of balance out. Checklists, for example, we just went through a little checklist, sort of like a questionnaire. So if you have a previous project, that would be a good one. Some sort of a checklist of here, try this, and have you considered this? And the analysis of assumptions. At the beginning of a project, you made a lot of assumptions. For example, one of the assumptions might be the price point for my kumquat peeler is going to be $19.95. And we're going to sell it via, QVC on TV, and it's going to be one of those as seen on TV kind of advertisements on late night TV, and that's what our assumptions are. And then later on, you just find out that that is not the correct price point. So you need to just keep going back and making sure that all your assumptions are still valid. Some people use diagramming, some sort of like a flow chart or a network diagram, something like that basically says, okay, we're going to go from here to here to here to here to here. And the idea is somebody looks at that and goes, whoa, what happens if this step doesn't happen? Okay, cool. So an influence diagram, what are the external pressures that kind of alter, the processes? Yeah, okay. So there's a thing called a risk register. Now in the book, this is horrible graphics, so don't even bother. It looks just like this in the book, so that's not really the point. So typically you'd probably put this in a spreadsheet or something. And this is basically trying to list all of the risks that you think, and then later you can kind of sort them by priority of what you think is the most likely one. Okay, so let me just go through the headings here because some of them are kind of weird. So the first one is a risk ID. In other words, a number that you give up, right? Some sort of a rank, typically 1 being the highest risk. The name of this thing, what this risk is, a short description of the risk, a category, people-related risk, financial-related risk, that kind of stuff. The root cause, the risk is this, but that's not really the problem. The real problem is something else. The trigger, a trigger would be, okay, let's talk about the EVM chart, the Earned Value Management Guide. So let's say one of the risks is I'm gonna have a shortage of qualified people, and my schedule is going to run out. And so a trigger would be my EVM chart goes below 0.95. I go, whoa! Okay, so that's a trigger. It says, oops, one of these risks is actually coming true. It's like evidence that is coming through. What my potential response might be, who's the owner of the risk, who's responsible for that particular thing, the probability of it occurring, the financial impact, and what the current status is. So in the book, they talk about specifically about one of the examples. And the idea is, let's say you have a brand new customer. You've never done work with this customer before in your entire life. And so you're not really comfortable with them, and they're not really comfortable with you. And so they start asking a lot of questions. And so one of the risk categories would be, we've never done business with this people before. And so we don't, we haven't gelled yet with communication. We haven't quite figured it out yet. That's a risk. And so their little example talks about, the communications and the things that could possibly go wrong because of a brand new vendor. Okay. So I produced one of these guys, and perhaps I've sorted them. We may go into some more math associated with the probability and impact, and that may be the way that you produce this rank, is based upon the probability and impact. But that brings us to the next topic, which is the qualitative analysis. So qualitative analysis on page 442 is when it starts. So let's just talk about this. I'm going to talk about an absurd scenario. All right. The likelihood that an asteroid would strike the Earth is incredibly low. So the probability is microscopic. I mean, it's I'm making these numbers up. 0.000001%. Okay, that an asteroid would strike this year. The impact would be to destroy all life on the planet. Okay, so wow. So what is the ranking of an asteroid strike? Well, that'd be kind of tough. I mean, the probability is really, really low, but the impact is astronomically huge. So if you're going to destroy all life on the entire planet, make it uninhabitable for millions of years, then that's probably going to be a high risk. So it's the combination of the two. All right, so here's an example that I used that was from the other class I keep referencing to, the IT, Security and Risk Management class. So here's an example from that book. All right, it goes like this. Let's just say that there's a 10% chance that you would get caught out in a thunderstorm once a year. Well, every year. In a year. Okay, in a year you have a 10% chance of getting caught in a thunderstorm. This is all just made up, so just bear with me. And then there's a 5% chance that if you are out in a thunderstorm, you get hit by a hailstone. So the combination of the two, 10% chance of you being in a storm and a 5% chance of you hitting by hail if you're in a storm, means you have a 0.0 or 0.5% chance of getting hit by a hailstorm. So it's a probability, and then it kind of multiplies and multiplies and multiplies, right? Likelihood times likelihood times likelihood. Okay, and so what's the impact? Well, the impact is I could have, maybe if it's a big hailstone, I'd have to go to the hospital, or maybe I have a concussion, right? So whatever the impact is, if it was monetary, let's say, I don't know, this is kind of a dumb, but let's say it's going to cost my car, it's going to cost me $1,000 to get the dents out of my car. So 0.5% chance my car is going to get caught out in a hailstorm and get hit, and then it's going to cost me $1,000, $10,000, whatever it is, to get it fixed. So probability and impact. Okay. So there's a kind of a matrix here to try to show that. So if you have, low probability and low impact, that's not likely to happen. And even if it did, it's not going to be that devastating. Those are the ones you can just say, we probably won't spend too much time on it. On the other hand, if the probability of this occurring is high and the impact is high, I need to be paying attention to risk number 1 and risk number 4. Those are the guys that are going to bite me because they are likely to occur and their impact is going to be very high. Now, this doesn't put numbers against it, but you could, because the next section in the book talks about how do you apply numbers to this. This is just trying to categorize risks, and this is kind of arbitrary, low, medium, and high. Again, not doing math on it, but you can kind of figure out, high risk, high probability is that corner is where you need to be paying attention. Okay, so one more time. Again, it's not really math here at this point. they talk about these risk factors. And so this is another way of looking at the exact same thing. The probability of failure, okay, so that's not that much different than this probability. And impact is not that much different as consequence. So probability and consequence. Let's say, for example, that this guy right here is like, it looks to me, I'm just looking at that, probably 75% chance that's going to occur. Okay, I'm just kind of eyeballing it. And most likely its impact is going to be like 90% of the value of whatever this project is at stake. So again, there's not really math against that, but it allows you to look at, well, these are low risk ones and these are medium risk ones, and I've got some high risk ones out there I need to be paying attention to. So whatever this guy is, which is probably 1 in 4, man, I definitely need to be paying attention to 1 in 4. They are likely to occur and their impact is going to be pretty doggone big. Okay. So the next thing to talk about is the top 10. So maybe you've got, 50 things on the list. I don't have time to do all 50. So maybe you ought to concentrate on the top 10. Now the top 10 might change, okay? Because, for example, the risk of getting a winning bid, that ends when the contract is awarded. Now I have other risks, right? Okay, so some risks completely go away. All right. So the next thing you talk about is this top 10 list. So here's the ranking this month, whatever the ranking was last month, and then the number of months in the top 10. So inadequate planning is now my number one issue. It used to be the absence of leadership, so maybe I actually got that fixed. And so this is a good way of tracking changes in that risk assessment thing, because they don't stay. So revising cost estimate and revising schedules and blah 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 blah. So they think planning is the current problem. Absence of leadership used to be, now it's number 3 on the list, so we're doing okay. Kind of cool. So this is a good technique. I'd kind of sort of recommend it. Okay. So now we're talking about the quantitative analysis on page 447. Now, by the way, you can do both of these at the same time. You can do the qualitative and quantitative simultaneously. You don't have to wait to finish one before you start the other. But basically, it goes into several phases. There's a data gathering phase, and then some sort of analysis or modeling, and then expert judgment. So I'm gathering data, I'm doing some sort of analysis, or I could just use expert judgment to come up with what my quantitative is. Okay, so there's this really cool thing called a decision tree. A decision tree is, for example, might help me pick, in the case study, might pick the projects that are likely to provide me financial gain. All right, so here's this thing. So I have a decision point right here. Should I pick project 1 or should I pick project 2 to bid on? All right, so project 1 is a big project, and project 2 is this tiny little project. It's only a $10,000 project. So, right? But the thing is, this big project, there's only a 20% chance of you winning that contract. So here's my outcome. But down here, I probably have a 70% chance, or backwards. So it turns out that project 2 actually is the better choice, even though it's not as big of a project. But because this project is not likely to happen, the decision tree could help you say, I'm going to pick project 2 over project 1. Even though it's not as big, it's not as flashy, the likelihood of me getting this project means I'm probably going to end up with more money. So $30,000 outcome if I pick project 2 under the current scheme, and only $28,000 if I did it the other way. Okay? Okay. This is a good place to stop for the 15-minute mark.